C.S. Lewis said, "Grief is like the sky, it covers everything. This is our world as we know it right now. The greatest gift that my parents gave me is my siblings, and Wes was an extraordinary sibling. I am Cece. I am the eldest of the clan. Wes was the third. Paul was in between. The first thing I remember about Wes when we were children was when we lived in Perrysburg, Ohio, which is a suburb of Toledo, and we were playing in the front yard. He was about 2, so that made me 4. And he walked up to me with worms hanging out of his mouth. What ensued was not fun, but that is my first recollection of my brother Wes. What I would like you to know about him, and I'm sure some of you have wondered, is why do we call him Wes when his name is Steve? It's actually Stephen Thomas. We are of German stock. We are hardy and stocky. And most of us have battled our weight during our lifetime, but God loved Wes. He always had this baby fat around his middle. And so when he was in 7th, 8th, or 9th grade, his best friend, Daryl Lockridge, who remains his lifelong friend, told him that he was so fat he could manufacture his own Wesson oil. And so to that end, his buddies started calling him Wesson. And eventually it became shortened to Wes, so that by the time he was a senior in high school and a cheerleader, on his cheerleading sweater, his name was Wes. Now that brings me to Wes's cheerleading experience. And I know y'all are all laughing at the sight of Wes being a cheerleader. Well, in our small Catholic high school of Mount Carmel, to be a cheerleader was a senior privilege because there were only 3 boy cheerleaders and 3 girl cheerleaders. And Paul and I had been cheerleaders, so he had to try and outdo us. As a dutiful sister, I cut classes at U of H to go to the Mount Carmel gym on the day of tryouts, and I ended up sitting with the nuns, praying for Wes and hoping that he wouldn't shame the family too horribly. He did very well. He did all of the moves with precision and accuracy, and when it came time for him to do the jump at the end, I think he probably jumped about 1/8 of an inch off the ground. Oh, wait a second. Maybe that was 1/16 of an inch. The nuns were laughing so hard that they were crushing me in between them. But what Wes lacked in skill and ability, he made up with in enthusiasm, and he was elected cheerleader. I do not possess words adequate enough to pay tribute to my brother, so I borrowed some from Ralph Waldo Emerson. To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find beauty in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To know even one has breathed easier because you have lived here. That is to have succeeded. You, my brother Wes, have mightily succeeded. My prayer for us all is that we soon remember you with more smiles than tears. I find comfort in knowing that you are with our God, our parents, our brother Paul, and that we will see you again. Bio con Dios, my brother, I love you.
Maggie Waldner de la Garza. I'm Wes's sister. I'm right behind him in birth order. He's 19 months older than me, and we spent a lot of time as little kids and teenagers and all growing up together because of our closeness in age. Wes was a typical brother, chasing me with frogs and lizards, blowing up frogs and lizards, taking me on bike rides to find the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and putting frogs in my arms, doing all the things I always assumed all brothers did to sisters. However, when we were in high school, there was a night, and anybody that ever visited us knew our home, that in the back, Cece, Paul, Wes, and I had rooms to ourselves. It was known as the back wing, and we each, for the first time in our lives, had a bedroom to ourselves. One night, Wes walked in my bedroom. I was studying for a history test. He goes, "What are you doing?" I told him I was studying for a history test. He wanted to know on what. I told him the Battle of New Orleans. He said, "You got it made. I can help you with that." And I looked at him, "You're gonna help me study?" Wes was not the best of students at the time. Anyway, he proceeds to tell me about a song that he knew, and it helped him make the best grade he had ever made in high school. And it was a song by Jimmy Horton called The Battle of New Orleans. We spent the entire night learning. He was teaching me that song, and he would not let me go to bed until I could sing the whole song for him, and he promised me it would help me through the test. I don't think he did any of his homework that night. The next day I took the test, and when I got the results, Wes was very eager to find out how I had done, and I had done very well, and he really was pleased and happy for me and happy that he had helped me. He was even happy because his grade was higher than mine. Anyway, this story about Wes and about his caring and making sure I did something and I could do something right was typical of him. It shows the teenage brother that he could be on occasion, and the man he grew into, raising a family, helping to take care of the communities in the Bay Area and Houston area, leading young Boy Scouts to manhood, and spending all of his time taking care of Marines and veterans. Wes, I love you to death. I will miss you forever, and I can't believe you are gone, but we will see each other on the other side. Rest in peace, my dear brother. I love you.
Hi, this is Kathy. I am Wes's youngest sister, and I'm here to say a few things about Wes. He was the one of the best big brothers you could ever have. I've only had two, but they were both really really good. Anyway, Wes was great. I remember he when I was real young and when he was around some, he'd help me with my homework. He always had the most patience with me than anybody else. Believe it or not, it was Wes that had the patience with me. But anyway, I remember that fondly. And also I remember a night that Wes and Daryl Lockridge had to babysit the four little kids, and they obviously were not into it, and they wanted to just get us into bed and be done with it. And me and TJ were sharing a bed, and we were goofing off obviously and not settling down. So they came in and tried to bribe us with a whole bunch of pennies. Well, there's not anywhere to put pennies in a bed, so I ate them, and pennies don't really sit on a stomach real well, especially multiple pennies. Anyway, so then I promptly threw up all over TJ and the bed and myself, and then they had to come back in and clean us up. And we were counting pennies. We couldn't remember how many there were. And anyway, it was really kind of worth it anyway. um, but also he was the kindest man. He would, if you were in need of anything, he would make sure that you got it. I, when I first moved to Corpus Christi, we had this water problem where we couldn't even boil water. You couldn't shower, you couldn't drink it. There were lines and lines to get fresh water. And he was actually going to drive 5 hours from his house to my house and bring me water and to make sure that I was taken care of. Luckily, we were taken care of, and he didn't have to do that, but I know he would have. Um, and he would have done it for anybody that needed it. He would have done it. And that's the kind of guy he was. And he just made sure that whatever he could do to help somebody, it was going to get done. And I'm going to miss him very much. And I know that he's with Paul and Mom and Dad and Father Larry, and they're going to be looking down on us all and helping us through. And especially with Patty and the boys, he's going to help them make it through too. And it's really hard right now, but we have to get through it for him. That's what he'd want us to do. I love you, big brother, and I'm going to miss you very, very much. And God bless. Bye.
Hi, I'm Mary. I'm the fifth of the Waldner 9 children, however you want to say that. Wes was a lot of things to a lot of people, a lot of different ways, obviously. For me, I guess he always felt he had to play the big brother role. He could be pretty gruff with me, and I never understood why, because we didn't see each other that often, but he always felt he had to keep me in line. And because of that, that is why this memory of him is so special to me. It was about 3 years ago. He was up here in the hill country with my 2 younger brothers, John and Larry, and all the local guys, and they had been out playing golf. And then when they were finished, they came to Scott's house, my son Scott. It was his birthday, and it was his housewarming. And they showed up, and they had clearly been having a good time on the golf course, just a few beers. And we all hugged and did our how are yas, and I kind of went my way because I was helping get stuff going. And I finally went outside to sit down and get some fresh air and relax for a minute, and I looked across the yard, and there's Wes sitting on a bench with my 2.5-year-old granddaughter, Emery. And they are in an intense conversation. And I'm sitting there thinking, first of all, I can't believe that Emery isn't scared to death of him. And second of all, I would give anything to hear what in the world was being said. So they were in this deep conversation, and there was a little laughing, and there was yeses and nos and all that stuff. And then they got up and walked hand in hand over to the food table, and Wes proceeded to help Emery fix her dinner. He helped her get her plate going. And then he walked her back over to the bench, and he sat her down, and he went and got her a drink, and he brought it to her, and then he went and got his dinner, and he went and sat with Emery, and they ate together. Now, in my world, it blew me away. I thought, oh my goodness, number one, Wes obviously was in a great frame of mind, and number two, Emery, there was no fear in this child. She was having a great time with Uncle Wes. So they ate. Clearly Emery got bored, and off she went. So I got up and went and sat next to Wes and said, what in the world was that all about? He said, well, Emery and I had some things we needed to talk over. No worries. And so I asked him, how was your golf game? And he said, I stink. He said, most terrible game I've ever played. And then he laughed and said, haven't had more fun in a long time. I really enjoyed it. So we went our separate ways, and a little bit later in the evening, when it was getting a little bit sticky outside, you know, the older folks make their way in, and we're sitting around the living room with me and Wes and John and Larry, and I think my husband Wes, and we're enjoying the air conditioning, and through the living room runs Emery. And Wes stops her and goes, Emery, who's your favorite uncle? And he points to John, my little brother John, and it was like, it's between John and I. Who's your favorite uncle? And of course, to all of us, it only makes sense that it would be John. John isn't scary, but Wes is scary. And Emery looked at Wes, and he looked at John, and she smiled, and she clearly pointed to Wes. And that just won his heart. It was hilarious. Wes loved it. John was shocked. How could this happen? A 2.5-year-old. Really, Wes? Here you have to be gruff and firm and stern and all those things, when really and truly, you were nothing but a big teddy bear, and you got caught. So thank you. Thank you for being so sweet and gentle and loving to my granddaughter. Thank you for showing me your heart and your other side that I didn't get to see very often. And thank you for being my big brother. I love you. I'll miss you. And you have a piece of my heart.
Hi, I'm Kathy Snow Waldner, and I am Wes's sister-in-law. I first met Wes when I was 14. He was a sophomore in high school, and I was a freshman. His sister was one of my best friends, and so I spent a lot of time at their house. And over the years, I got to know all the brothers and sisters pretty well. And ironically enough, I ended up marrying his older brother, Paul. If you knew Wes, you knew he was a little bit burly and gruff on the outside, but on the inside, he had a heart of pure gold. Nothing demonstrated this more than the loving care that he gave his brother Paul when he sustained a serious brain injury. Every Sunday for several years, Wes would come and hang out with Paul. When he arrived early on Sunday morning, he would watch Joel Osteen with Paul. I always thought this was pretty funny because in previous years they had gotten their spiritual enlightenment on the golf course on Sunday mornings. Then later in the day, they would switch to watching sports, and it didn't matter what was on, they were going to be watching it because they were both big sports enthusiasts. Wes would always bring his lunch on these occasions, and after I thought about it for a while, I think it was just a ploy to sneak contraband into Paul. Because oftentimes when I would come back and Wes would be gone, I'd find Cheeto crumbs in Paul's wheelchair and ice cream stains on his shirt. So this let me know that the guys had had a pretty good time. On other occasions, I would overhear Wes trying to tell Paul an off-color joke, and I mean a really off-color joke. But unfortunately, he would start laughing when he got to the punchline, which would make Paul laugh, and he never really got finished telling his joke. This was pretty heartwarming to see these guys hanging out and doing things that they had been doing all their life, telling jokes and getting in trouble. Wes was a very big supporter of the Marine organization in Houston, and he really enjoyed celebrating the Marine Corps birthday. After Paul became injured, Wes spent every Marine Corps birthday with Paul, and they often invited other fellow Marines to join them, and Wes would bring a big cake, and we'd have a big celebration. And at the end of every party, we would sing the Marine Corps hymn. At that time, I had probably been married maybe 38, 39 years, and I had never heard Paul sing the hymn. But the first time Wes sang it, Paul belted it out the top of his lungs, and he knew every single word. That was quite surprising to everyone. As the years followed at the next several parties, all of us became quite familiar with the Marine Corps hymn, and we sang it often. That will always be a very special memory for me of Wes and Paul singing the Marine Corps hymn together. If I could say anything about Wes that I'd like for you to know, it's that I do not know a kinder, gentler, more giving and generous caregiver than he was to his brother Paul. He did anything and everything that was asked of him and so much more. and I will never forget it, and I will be eternally grateful. It's really hard thinking that I'm not going to see Wes again, but just knowing that he and Paul will be reunited and again get to share that brotherly bond that was so strong makes it hurt a little bit less. I sure am going to miss you, Wes. Love you.
I suppose the way it works is we're here for only a while, some of us longer than others, and then we move on. It's just that it's difficult for those that remain when you lose someone who's special to you. My first memory of Wes was in the 5th grade, a Lady Mount Carmel Elementary School, and back in those days, one thing you could do for recess was play Foursquare. As sometimes would happen, people would get into disagreements, push comes to shove about the way the ball would bounce on the line, and on this particular day was no different than a lot of others. A couple of guys got into it, and I just noticed that Wes steps out of the waiting line and walks up, and without any physical force or anything, was able to just reason the guys, talk to the guys, and calm the situation, got us back to playing Foursquare. It wasn't anything that made us become fast friends or anything, but it was just something that you remember, that you notice about somebody and you remember for the rest of your life. So time marches on, and senior year of high school, Sharon Ripstorff, Madeline Abeg, Kathy Feehan, Ron Cuvion, Wes and myself were cheerleaders for the 67 class, and this was customary back then. You would travel to SMU for a few days during the summer to cheerleading camp. And during the day, you would learn how to do cheers, work as a team, and at night you would they put you up in the dorm. And one particular night, I remembered, really hard to forget, as guys do and people do maybe at that age sometimes, I don't know, we got to horsing around, and one thing leads to another, and we wound up here, we're throwing things at each other. Anything you could pick up or lay your hands on, you were throwing each other across the room. And we did that only to realize at the end that one of the things that was being thrown around was red permanent marker. I mean, there was red marks, permanent marks, all over the walls, floors, cabinets, everywhere. We tried what we had, but which really wasn't much of anything, and nothing would get it off. And Wes pulls a bottle, spray can of off insect repellent, and says, "Hey, try this." And you wouldn't believe it. It was like wiping water up with a towel. You'd spray that on the mark, the permanent marker, and it just wiped it right off. So at the end of this cleanup, I asked Wes, I said, what in the world made you want to bring off insect repellent to cheerleaders camp? And he just said, well, for what other reason than just to clean up the red magic marker and to save our ass. After graduation, everybody splits and goes off to make a life for themselves. I went off to college. Wes went to Vietnam. We'd subsequently see each other every 5 years at our high school reunions. And on or about 2002, Wes invited Bill Batchelor and myself to join he and Paul for golf on the 26th, the day after Christmas, which happened to be the Feast of Stephen. And we did this, continued to do this for a number of years. And it really became an important day for me, something I really look forward to. If you think Wes was entertaining on the golf course, you should see he and Paul on the golf course together. And we did this for a number of years. And then Paul left us. And now we were three. And occasionally we were able to get someone to complete the foursome. But until 2017 came along and our 67 class 50th reunion happened. And at that point, we were able to add several people, which we've continued. I've always been aware that Wes was involved with social work. I had no idea the extent of it until I saw his resume. For the time he had here with us, he was a busy guy, a very busy guy, helping to find solutions for the handicapped, the disadvantaged, to better their lives. He was just that kind of a guy. That's what was important to him. The Feast of Stephen has always been special and something to look forward to. We'll continue that tradition, I'm sure, as long as we're able. But now, of course, it won't be the same because there'll be somebody missing, someone real important. Wes had a unique sense of humor. He had an admirable compass, an admirable moral compass, and he loved his family. He was a people person and someone we were blessed to have among us. I will certainly miss you, big guy, but I'll be able to smile for all the memories that we had and that you left.
Steve Waldner, Man of Mystery. Why was he called Wes anyway? I may never know. Was it really because he used Wesson oil on his hair? I don't know. Who knows? We were together in the 80s and into the 90s when our boys were young, playing baseball at the Y and in Cub Scouts. And in Y ball, Steve was the coach, and I was the assistant coach. And I can remember he was. I can remember him yelling at Cameron out there. Cameron had not developed into the great athlete that he is today. He kind of looked like a duck when he ran. And I can remember Steve out there yelling at him, "Cameron, run! Cameron, wake up out there!" And this and that. And one time we were at a game. We had a game going on, and something came up, and he was talking about having to leave and a little concerned about that. Could he go? And I just told him, I said, "Go ahead and go, Steve. I can yell at Cameron today." And another time, this was either the scouts or the team, I don't know. Got 8 or 9 boys, and we went to the Astrodome and then kind of looked around there, and I think it might have been a tour, but I remember being out on the field, out on the AstroTurf out there, and various Astros would come out and talk about different skills with the boys, and Craig Biggio came out and talked to them about bunting, and I was impressed. It was Biggio's rookie year, but he was already kind of a celebrity and pretty famous, and I just remember being so impressed that here we were out there meeting and getting up close to Craig Biggio, and you know, we weren't some big tour that unloaded the buses in the parking lot or anything like that. We were just a little group of boys from Garden Villas, and I will always remember that. He had so much energy for putting together things that were fun and amazing and surprising for the kids to do. I always admired his energy and his attitude, and we'll miss him. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jen Waldner Grant, Uncle Wes's oldest niece. Uncle Wes was a real fixture in my childhood. From hanging out at Oma and Opa's house in Kemah to watching he and my dad participate in fun runs and century rides and triathlons, to hearing countless stories from my dad's childhood where Uncle Wes was always a central figure. Growing up, he and my dad would meet every Sunday morning to play golf, very early. They did that to not only beat the heat, but so that they could get home early to spend more time with their families that day. I can only imagine the things that they discussed on the golf course, and it's probably better that I didn't know. When I returned back to Houston after an 11-year stint in Boston, my job involved getting connected with the Houston nonprofit community. Many times upon introducing myself to these organizations, a familiar response was, "Are you related to Steve Waldner?" It was clear that Uncle Wes was very respected and very well connected among these social service organizations, and I'm grateful that his reputation gave me a true in with these groups. After my dad's brain injury, Uncle Wes's commitment to spending time with my dad and helping care for him was truly heartwarming. Despite being a tough Marine, he had a very gentle and kind heart. And I certainly saw this when he played Santa Claus for the first time last year at the Waldner family Christmas party. He always found a way to connect with everyone. There are just so many memories I have of Uncle Wes, from his queso and twisted sense of humor to the pride that he had for his family and his country. I sure am going to miss you, Uncle Wes, and I love you very much.
Family, friends like you have learned of the passing of Steve Waldner, and it's made me reflect on the last 26 years. I had the honor to know him and know the Waldner family, and I can think back many fond memories of coming over to Cameron's house. Cameron and I, a year apart, and knew each other through school and through scouting, and I knew Mr. Waldner was heavily involved in scouting, as was the Scoutmaster, Cubmaster. It was a great passion of his. Cameron and I, being Eagle Scouts, we know what that passion is deep, deep down. I knew he, Marine, once a Marine, always a Marine, was very, very proud of heritage, proud of being a father and a husband, and loved his train sets. Oh my goodness. Every time I came over, there'd be a new train, caboose, engine, track he'd be working on. Model enthusiasts, tinkering with building ships and whatnot. And thinking back on a story recently, you wouldn't think it would be a fun memory, but after just a few days after Hurricane Harvey, I came over with the camera to help them assess the damage there at the house, and Mr. Waldner kind of guided the tour through and pointed everything out, but I couldn't believe his centered focus of the task we had to do. This was just recording the damage for insurance purposes, but the sense of humor he had about it, and I'm like, I don't know how I would have reacted going through something like that, but the sense of humor about it, and the things that were critical, after getting Patricia and him out of the house, making sure the photo albums were saved, and after that, making sure that his Pride, Joy, the USS Constitution model he was working on was safe, because he spoke about that very highly, and we've got that in the video. Made sure I pointed that out. Very proud. Always so proud of his hobbies, and gardener, volunteer. He was always volunteering all the time. His efforts, and just tirelessly, and it was an incredibly admirable quality, as for scouts to look up to, and I think he was a fantastic role model. I'm reading amazing stories of how he influenced people, and we're touring around the house for the Harvey damage, and he's pointing out things that have absolutely nothing to do with the storm, and he's telling me random facts about the trees and the gardens and Venus flytrap and how it works. And you know, I didn't want to be like, hey, let's stay on target. Let's stay focused on the damage and whatnot. But he just found the positivity out of such a horrific event to go through, and that's an amazing quality not a lot of people have. He told me to take care with the camera and not back into the pool, where he wouldn't be able to fish me out, like that. But yeah, it was great sense of humor, always kidding around, and gonna miss him. And I feel for Cameron, Patrick, and Patricia, and my heart goes out to him and family and friends. And I hope you will join me and join the family in celebrating his life and sharing a story with us. I think this is a beautiful medium. We have this technology, so let's share some stories for Steve. Thanks. Oh, one last thing. He was very sad that his Jethro Tull album was one of the victims of Harvey. So this is for you, Steve.
Really don't mind if you sit this one out. My words but a whisper, deafness a shout. I may make you feel, but I can't make you think. Your sperm's in the gutter, your love's in the sink. So you ride yourself over the fields, and you make all your animals deals, and your wise men don't know.
It's a great track, and Jethro Tull, Thick as a Brick. Check it out.
Hello, my name is Socrates. I had the pleasure of being introduced to the Waldner family back in 2003 through Cameron, who was my first really good friend here in Texas when I first moved here after I had gotten out of the Army. And that same year, ended up meeting the family. I met Mr. Waldner, wonderful man, great guy, always very welcoming, quick-witted, very jovial, and knew his stuff. Could tell that from the first time that I met him. And my memory of Mr. Waldner that came to mind immediately upon hearing about everything was one that has actually been kind of a cornerstone of my life for the past 15 years, if you will, or 16 years. When I first met Mr. Waldner, and he found out that I was ex-military, he asked me a simple question, and it's something that's pretty common amongst military guys, vets, and everything. And he said, "Hey, so why'd you get out? Why didn't you, go for a full 20 years or whatnot?" And I remember my response to him had been, "Well, Mr. Waldner, I was really good at the things I did in the Army, and those were things that I never had really ever wanted to be good at. So I decided to do my term, do my deployment, come home." And that was that. It was comment in passing. About a year and a half later, I ended up getting recalled and had to report to Camp Atterbury up in Indiana to deploy to Iraq. And, wasn't terribly excited about it. I mean, whoever is going into a hot zone, there's no reason to look forward to that. But threw some stuff in my pickup and got on the road, started driving up, and about 8, maybe 9 hours into my drive, I get a phone call from Mr. Waldner, randomly, fairly late in the evening, kind of lonely stretch of road, and Cameron had told him that I had been recalled to active service and that I was going. And he had decided to give me a call. And he spoke to me and give me some really great advice that I've carried with me to this day, my whole life. And he talked to me about going and doing your duty and doing what you needed to do, and to make sure that what you focused on was taking care of your buddies around you, and that I was there for whatever the greater purpose was, but my immediate duty was to those around me and to ensure their safety and their well-being, just as it was theirs to ensure my safety and my well-being. And that my main goal should always be to be able to come home and give my mom a hug. He was very adamant about that. Told me not to be a hero, be a soldier. Do what needs to be done, but don't go for glory. Don't go for excess. Go and do the job and do it well. And, cross the T's, dot the I's, and then come back. Because that's all that you need to do. That's all you need to do to be successful at it. And his whole thing was a 5 or 10 minute conversation at best. But he was very adamant to not let the fear of whatever potential situation I might have been in get the better of me, but to use that fear to keep myself aware of what was going on, and not to be rash and overly bold, but to be brave in the sense to control the fear and to be able to make through and make sure that everything came out good at the end of it all. And he also talked to me that I had to be aware that there might be situations where there would be those that I went in with that I wouldn't be coming back with. The man knew what he was talking about, because that is true. But he told me that those personal sacrifices that people made, that they were for their fellow soldiers, for their buds, and to always remember that, if someone tells you that they got the left side, that you got to make sure you got the right side. And that translated pretty well for me into civilian life also. But talked to me at length for just a few minutes, I guess. It just had such an impact about making sure that I was looking out for those around me, and that I was making sure to come home to mom, to not be scared of what the future might bring, because you can't be successful if you're scared of the future. You just gotta keep doing what you train to do, and do it to the best of your abilities. And I kept that with me. After all was said and done, and I made it back. And as I struggled to readjust into normal life, one of the things that was always the cornerstone of my mind of trying to reacclimate back to normal life was his idea of, don't let the fear rule you, and don't be scared of what the future holds. Don't be scared of the unknown. Embrace it. Better yourself, train yourself, learn things, move forward, and utilize that base of knowledge that you've developed to kind of embrace the uncertainty of the future. And that helped me more than any other thing that I tried to get myself back into normalcy, if you will. And those simple words that he said to me, just with such conviction, and that deep conviction that a simple, honest truth only holds. And coming from a man that was just wise. Yeah. But that's my story that I will always keep with me about him. That he called the young man that was uncertain about what was going to happen to him over the very near future. And he gave me some very simple guidance that ended up being more profound than I realized at the time. And that guidance has helped me for the past 15, 16 years of my life and will continue to do so. So, much love, honor, and respect. Mr. Waldner will always have a huge place in my heart.
Hi, everybody. When I think about Uncle Wes, a couple things come to mind. Queso, the Marines, social work, him dancing at the family reunions to that song by the Doors. And but I think what I love most about Uncle Wes is that he seemed to me very comfortable with who he was. That he was comfortable in his skin and wasn't trying to be something that he wasn't. And I really admired that about him, because that's something I strive to do in life, and it's hard, and you know, it seems sort of effortless for him. And you know, he was just a really great uncle to me, and my childhood memories are him being around and joking and laughing and just bringing a lot of joy. And then in my adulthood, I remember when I decided I wanted to be a social worker. I was so excited to come tell him that I had come to that decision. And I remember the conversation we had, and I was picking his brain, and he was so excited for me. And he was a big part of me preparing to go to school for that, and a big part of me being in school. When I was in school, we had to do a research project on PTSD, and he allowed me to interview him for that project, and a video interview, and I just learned so much about his experience in Vietnam and what he went through and what he survived, and how that kind of inspired him. It was one of the things that inspired him to become a social worker. And I remember I shared that interview with my class, and everyone was just kind of speechless. They were in awe of his strength and his ability to overcome something so hard and channel that experience into something good, which for him was helping others, and not just with his job with social work, but all the volunteer work that he did. And so I've always looked up to him in that regard. And, you know, I would say that he was truly my dad's best friend. And I do smile when I think about the two of them together now, because I personally believe that they are. And I think they're playing golf and probably drinking scotch and telling a bunch of bad jokes. And so that makes me happy. He was also just such a good brother to my dad when my dad needed it most. And I really love him for that. And then lastly, at one family reunion, he put the spotlight on me and made me come up in front of everyone, and which is really uncomfortable for me. And he honored some volunteer work I did in Africa, and he gave me this, which I hadn't really appreciated so much until now. And keep this on my desk. Makes me smile now when I see it. And I think that him honoring me was shortly after my dad had passed away, and I think that was his way of just giving me some fatherly energy that I probably really needed during that time. So I'm really lucky to have had such a special uncle, and we are here for you, Aunt Patty and Cameron and Patrick, and
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brian Herbert. I'm joining the rest of us in wishing Steve Waldner a farewell. And thought I'd take a moment to share a brief, though lifelong lesson I learned from Steve. In times of disappointment, there's still humor to be found. Back in high school, we had just competed for a one-act play. We received first runner-up when we were sincerely hoping for first place. And without hesitation, while the announcer was still giving out awards, Steve spoke up much louder than he should have from a few rows behind all the rest of us, and he said, "Well, that's a lot like getting butt fucked by a yak." To which a group of very confused yet curious teenagers turned and looked, waiting for him to continue. And he did. He continued with just a brief pause and went on to explain that while it really sucks to get butt fucked by a yak, it's still a little bit satisfying.
Wes, I'm gonna talk to you like you were just sitting right here next to me. So sorry about my sinus problems and the puffy eyes, but it's a damn Saharan desert we get to breathe now. You're lucky you missed it. Anyhow, there's so many stories I could use, but for the sake of brevity, I've decided to stick with the most recent ones. By the way, I'm so glad you, Nikki, and myself got to go to the last U of H basketball game on March 9th. We so enjoyed ourselves, and of course the Cougars won. Little did we know, though, that there would be no March Madness this year. You said to keep it short. That's really not fair, but I'll try. Since I knew you since 4th grade, I think it was. As I said, on Caring Bridge, Paul, Wes, and myself virtually lived on our makeshift football field right behind the high school and next to Wes and Paul's house. There were oh so many stories left out on that field, but suffice it to say, for the sake of being short, that they all revolved around extraordinary memories of our youth, not the least of which was how Steve got the name Wes, a name that certainly became a name of endearment for at least 6 decades. This is so terribly hard for me because every time I think of a story to tell about Wes, it elucidates about 3 or 4 others. That was truly, however, the gridiron of life in which Wes began showing me his future life of caring for so many people he would encounter. It's one of the reasons we would become such good friends. I hope it's not too simple of a metaphor, but for me it was profound. To exemplify that, it was only about 4 years later that I entered the Carmelite Seminary, and many factors influenced me to go, but I know one of them was your sense of caring for people, and I never got to tell you thanks for that. So I will end by telling you that that very same virtue came later in life as well. I got sick with a rare disease known as Castleman's disease. I had a very hard time walking and using my hands, which became numb and tingling. I was guilty of the sin of pride because I didn't want to use a wheelchair, but nonetheless I did, and was, I suppose, somewhat despondent. My wife was so very good, I called her Nurse Ratchet for those of you who remember One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I don't know what I would have done without her. However, it was the male influence of my boyhood friend, Wes, who gave me that extra push I needed. Wes would call and ask how I was doing, and come by and bring me a jumbo jack at lunch. But more importantly, we would begin talking about some good old times that we shared a long time ago. He did that with a good deal of regularity, too. Because of all that, today I only use a cane. In my house, I don't ever need that. I walk on my own. Because of my wife's feminine mystique and Wes's semper fi-ness, I expect to walk on my own in the very not too distant future. And guess what? I didn't even get to tell you thanks, Wes. So, here goes, my good friend. Thank you, dude. Wes's favorite expression for all his friends, and there were many, for all those wonderful years. I'll miss you, Wes. Love and prayers, Daryl.
So it's taken me a couple of times to finally get to a point with the video where I can really truly give honor to my dad and really remember him for who he was without just the suck of it all, right? So I figured, why don't I go in 2 to 3 minutes and try and give as many punchlines, give as many stories that I could possibly recall. They'll probably lack his zazz. And again, these are punchlines and things that I remembered throughout the years. So, I always remember sitting there, going to baseball games at the Astrodome, going and hearing the story that he told countless times of him and his brothers going in and sneaking bottles into the Astros game, and Johns fell out of his boot and went all the way down to the police. And he ran down there, picked it up, tipped his hat, and went on. And I mean, every time we went to go see a game at the Astrodome, we would do that. Also, you're going to see later on pictures of my dad and I in New York. I am in no way, shape, or form a Yankees fan. I'm an Astros fan through and through, but we went to go catch a Yankees game before Yankee Stadium was torn down, the house that Ruth built, But I constantly remember him talking about baseball and, why numbers are retired and all of these other things. But going to stadiums, that was just an experience for him. And if you ever, got to hear about when we had our German foreign exchange student, he would talk about the soccer hooligans and U of H game, Army versus Navy, or no, U of H versus Army or whoever, right? I mean, so much of it isn't the details, but it's the story, right, that the old man would tell. So this little German kid, 14 years old, wants to know about hooligans and, is it as bad as it is in Europe? And my dad's going, oh, no, it's nothing. And when you turn the corner and we're playing Army, there's a freaking tank there. And the kid goes, yeah, I can see why this isn't, so much of a thing here for y'all. I remember going down to the Marine Corps base with scouts and just hearing all the stories from, him up in the guard tower getting, rum balls sent from home and getting trashed and falling out of the guard tower to, things that no matter how big or small they are, they shape me. It was, he had a way of doing that, and it just kind of snuck in there, right? So in basic, there were like 3 or 4 stories. One is, scared the life out of me that I'd never go into the Marine Corps, is him being choked by his Marine Corps drill instructor, and then going in formation and marching by himself, and the drill instructor says, Waldner, take a look around, and he looks, and in his typical smart ass way goes, drill instructor, you've lost the rest of the platoon. He's like, yeah, I think you need to go to sick bay. To always volunteering. I mean, he wound up just listening and doing the things that he should have, but he volunteered and gave blood and got out of it and got sick leave and got beer. Which, the beer, I think, gives the affinity to, back at the Caton house when I would help him brew beer, to, a hobby that I've now continued on for 25 plus years. But it would be the stories that go along with it, or the bad jokes that go along with it. I mean, he had this one that would go on and on and on about, do you own a goldfish bowl? And you get to the end of the joke and the guy goes, no, I don't. And he goes, well, then you're homosexual, right? So, I mean, it's this long joke that just drags and drags and drags. And I mean, he would tell them at, when we were playing golf, or he would tell them wherever. I mean, he had this one with Jesus and Moses. They're all out playing golf and, miracles and all sorts of stuff. But I mean, he had a joke and he could remember all of the little details of it. So where was I? Had just all of these jokes that he could ramble off. I mean, and it wasn't just family and friends and Boy Scouts and all of this. I mean, he messed with elected officials. There was a joke that he pulled on a king in the White House with Richard Nixon, and the king asked him about his medal, and he goes, "Oh no, I can't tell you about that one." And the king keeps on persisting, and he tells this story about being in Vietnam, and there's this bunker, and they teach you just put your head down and you just charge and all of this. And he said, well, I charged and did all this, and they shot me and I died. And I mean, it was this grandiose story, and the king looks at him and is like, "You were putting me on." And he goes, "Yeah, well, no shit." And his superior officer gave him hell about it, and he's like, "I was pretty sure we, started the whole United States thing because we don't like kings." So, I mean, it was just these little nuggets that he would leave behind. But, just these last couple of years with the kids and seeing them out there and telling these stories, though some stories I will have to say, were definitely a product of his time. Though, yeah, I won't even go into that. You would hear him talk about Colt 45 Stadium, and we just knew we had to get the kids out of there because, but, these stories just went on and on. So, though his story has come to an end, I think the real story is how we pick up and live from here, and how the impact that we've seen from Opa to him and forward of giving back to the community continues. I mean, he gave countlessly to the Marine Corps Coordinating Council, countlessly to veterans, to Fort Bend, to Clear Lake, to the whole Houston region. But he didn't do it like a peacock. He did it where he would tuck it away, and he just would go and do it because it was the right thing. So I know he's pissed he won't be able to go out in the election this year. Lots of colorful things he has to say about the current administration, and now he hopefully gets to see it play out before we do up in heaven. So, he's got one on us there. But, we'll miss you, old man. I know this was a bunch of rambling. I mean, you always kept us on our toes, one way or another. So I'll miss you, and I love you. And God bless you.
I'm Patty, Steve's wife, also known as Wes, or the husband. And I want to thank Cameron for putting together this tribute to his dad, and for each individual who has taken the time to contribute a memory of Steve/Wes. His was a life that was led to the fullest, and it would be a shame if we didn't have these memories to come back to at a later date. He was a remarkable guy. In many ways, he was what some people would call a Renaissance man. He had such a vast interest in so many different topics, from horticulture, where he would take from seeds and plant those and lovingly get them to a point where he could transfer them to his garden. And then he watched over them and was so proud when they would bear fruit. He had an amazing talent for fixing things. he would give second and third and fourth and fifth lives to different appliances and different objects that we had that um, otherwise would have just been discarded. At an early age, his mom said she found her sewing machine completely taken apart in her bedroom. And it was because he just wanted to see how it worked. Well, she wasn't too upset with the fact, but she made it clear to him he had to put it back and it had to work once put it back together. So he exhibited these talents early on. Um, a love of academics, a love of reading, and his memory was second to none. He was able to maintain trivia and minute details of Civil War battles. And the great thing is that that gene from Steve was passed on to both of the boys. They both have tremendous memories, and they also have keen minds and the ability to appreciate all types of knowledge. And that's one thing that I will always cherish is that that little part of him lives on in both of our guys. Um, a lot of what Steve did was very simple, but at the same time very complex because all of all of his actions were um, geared from the heart. However, he had to work through sometimes complex emotions that were um, interwoven because of his experiences in Vietnam at such a tender age. When he first went to Vietnam, it was during the Tet Offensive, and he was taken in with one of the troop transports to deliver mail during some intense battles. And as soon as the plane came in, he was ready to run out of the tailgate, but they didn't prepare him that they were just going to dip him. And when they dipped him, he ran into the concrete and he was knocked out and had a concussion. And they had to come and drag him over behind the sandbags and bunkers because they were getting shelled. There were bullets flying every which way. And on his way back from there, he had run up into the airplane, and he was then followed by a fellow Marine who he got up and gave his seat to the other Marine. And as they were taking off, a bullet ripped through the metal in the plane, and it killed that Marine whose seat Steve had had just moments earlier. So he had a lot of instances like that where he considered people far more deserving to have lived who died. And he always questioned, why me? And then there was the one night where their camp was overrun. And it was a foggy night. And from that point on, Steve hated foggy nights because he had to hide in the shadows. And it was only with his K-bar that his life was saved on multiple occasions. And when dawn came and the enemy was leaving, the casualties were staggering with the deaths and the injuries. And Steve, for the rest of his life, woke up on the anniversary of that night in a cold sweat. So there were so many psychological issues that informed his life that he carried with him. And it's remarkable that he was the person that he was and was able to integrate those experiences as well as he did. And that's why when he came back to the States, he said, once I'm out of the Marines, my vow, my commitment is to follow in my dad's footsteps with social work and to rebuild communities and to make lives better, which he did. And he did it with all of his heart. But there was always still the prankster part in Steve. And he had that boyish pranksterism that carried forward. He always loved to tell a story about how he and his brother Paul, who was a year older than he was, would play jokes on his sister, who was just right behind him. As y'all know, there were 9 children altogether, and Steve was the third, and his sister Maggie was the fourth. Well, what they would do is Westmoreland milk was delivered to their home in glass gallon jugs. So when they knew Maggie was getting ready to come into the kitchen, they would open the refrigerator door and they would situate that glass milk jug in such a way that it was hanging precariously off of the shelf and it was only being held up by the door. So as soon as Maggie opened up the door, the milk would fall and it would break. And then you'd hear Paul and Steve go, Mom, Mom, Maggie's broken another gallon of milk. And of course, she'd get in trouble. And then there was a time when he was in high school and the class day was over, but the ROTC was meeting in the classrooms. So he had climbed up on the roof of the school and he had a long string of firecrackers and he was able to light them. And back then, the schools weren't air conditioned, so the windows were always open. And he threw that string of firecrackers in with the ROTC people. And he had a lot of fun with that. But his unusual sense of humor carried with him into adulthood. I can remember the time that we were over at one of our friends' parties, and it's a mixture of people who didn't know each other, people who had known each other a long time. And what we were charged with was when we came in, if we ran into someone we didn't know, we were told to ask the questions, well, how do you know the Crouches? And so Steve was in the bar with Guy behind the bar. And one of the folks came up to Steve while there, and he may have been a judge. There were a lot of people who were judges there, attorneys, and folks who were active in the community and politically. But Steve had no reverence. And one of the guys came up and asked Steve, "Well, how did you know Guy?" And Steve said, "I'll be forever, eternally grateful to him. Because if it wasn't for me, my life would have been so different. He was able to get me off of human trafficking between states." And so there was just quiet. Nobody quite knew how to respond to that. And Guy was kind of turning a little bit white. He was sort of disturbed. And then so Steve laughed. He says, "Oh no, it's just that both of our sons were in scouts together and we were scout leaders together. And that's really how we met." However, people were still a little bit leery of him there. And that was, I guess, the first instance where we experienced social distancing. So, he had fun with people. And then there was the time that he had gone to see his brother Paul, who was at Tier. And in the elevator, when we were there, in rolls Mickey Gilley from Gilley's nightclub. And he was in a wheelchair and he's being pushed by an attendant. And Steve says, "Oh my God, look, Patty, it's Killer." And if anyone knows, Mickey Gilley's cousin is Jerry Lee Lewis, who had the nickname Killer. So he knew who he was, but he was messing with him. He goes, "Oh, Killer, it's so good to see you. And, I'm wondering how you're doing." And he goes, "I'm not Killer." And he goes, "Oh, it's okay. Your secret's safe with me." He goes, I'm not Killer. And so then the floor opened and Mickey Gilly's being pushed out. And then so Steve pushes, he sticks his head out as they're rolling down the hall and he sees the back of the wheelchair. And he goes, Keller, I'm just wishing you all the best. I know that you're going to get through this quickly and easily. And at that point, then Mickey Gilly raised an arm and gave Steve the middle finger salute. So those are the kinds of things that we would encounter on a regular basis with Steve, with his humor. But he was a conduit for serendipity things to happen. I remember one time he had told me, and it surprised him, how a family had called and said, if there's anything you can do to help us, we'd be eternally grateful. Our van was stolen and it was fully outfitted for our disabled child, and the police recovered it, but it had been totaled. And, we're just hoping that there's some type of resource that is available that we can get transportation for our child. And then 2 days later, a family called up and said, we'd like to make a donation. We just recently upgraded and bought a new van for our child who's disabled, but the other one is still in good working order and we would like to donate it. And at that point, Steve was able to get the two families together, and each one was very, very happy about the outcome. And he always was concerned about the dignity of people and the seniors that he served in the Bay Area Community Center. And he knew that a lot of them on Fridays did not have food in their pantries for the weekend, and that they would be hungry on Saturday and Sunday. So he decided to start hosting bingo games on Friday afternoons, and the prize was food items. And he had the games rigged to where the ones who needed the food would always manage to get the food, but they felt like they had won it fairly, so that there was no loss of face taking it home with them. The one thing that gave Steve the greatest joy were his two sons and being a part of their lives. And he thoroughly enjoyed working with Scouts, being in Scouts, and the time alone that they had together on camping trips. And they were his greatest joy and his greatest pleasure. But we were also just so amazed and pleased that our family grew and that we had Steve's wife, Michaela, become a part of our family. And the incredible woman that she is and the partner that she made for Cameron gave him great joy. And then when Solomon and June came along, his cup overflowed. So Steve, again, was a complex man and a simple man. He loved his family dearly. He loved his community dearly, and he will be missed. There's a line from the movie The Descendants that George Clooney spoke when his wife was dying in the hospital. And he said to her, "You are my greatest joy and my greatest pain." Steve's passing has been the greatest pain. But his memories are the greatest joy. I'm going to move over a little bit because for several years, one of Steve's projects was Constitution. And I'm going to give you an opportunity. He would be very pleased for y'all to be able to see. Let's see if I can get this over here. His work that he had been so involved in. I'm hoping this will grow up, he lovingly engaged in this project. And let's see, it's better over here. He had lovingly engaged in this project over the years, and he was never satisfied. If you can see, there's a lot of rigging that goes in here, and he had little tweezers that he worked on to tie these knots. And there's just so much detail that went into each and every part of this, that he had multiple books and a lot of patience to put it together. I feel very fortunate that he has been a part of my life. He's been a part of our boys' life and a part of our grandchildren's life. There won't be a day that goes by that he won't be missed. But the thing that we take away is that it's so important to live for others and to do things for the right reason. And I feel privileged to have been his wife and grateful that he's been a part of my life. Thank you.
this on video?
No, I should.
Somebody better be getting this on video. I don't see any camera. Oh, there we go. There's the camera.